Apple is worth $3 trillion. They have made more money than almost any company in human history. They also sent drivers onto an active airport runway. They sold a laptop keyboard for 4 years, knowing it broke when dust touched it. They secretly slowed down your old iPhone and charged you $500 million for getting caught. And they called removing the headphone jack courage. Here is every major Apple failure, in full detail. MobileMe. Apple launched MobileMe in July 2008, alongside the iPhone 3G. The promise? Sync your email, contacts, calendar, and photos seamlessly across all your devices. The reality? Servers crashed, email went missing, sync didn't work. Customers lost data. The press was brutal. Walt Mossberg at the Wall Street Journal, one of Apple's most trusted voices in tech, called it far too flawed to be reliable. Steve Jobs did not take this quietly. He gathered the entire MobileMe team in Apple's on-campus auditorium. Standing on stage, he asked them a question. Can anyone tell me what MobileMe is supposed to do? When someone answered, Jobs responded, "So why the fucking doesn't it do that?" He spent an hour telling them they had tarnished Apple's reputation. He told them they should hate each other for having let each other down. Then he fired the head of the team on the spot and replaced him with Eddie Q. Apple gave affected users a free month of service and sent a letter of apology. MobileMe limped along until 2012 when Apple shut it down. The replacement was iCloud, which had its own problems, just less catastrophic ones. Antennagate. The iPhone 4 launched in June 2010 to enormous excitement. Thinner. Retina display. The most beautiful phone Apple had ever made. Then people started making calls. The antenna was wrapped around the outside edge of the device, a design choice that looked elegant in photos. When you held the phone naturally, in your left hand, fingers covering the lower left corner, you were bridging 2 separate antenna bands with your hand. Signal dropped. Not slightly, completely. Apple's response from Steve Jobs himself in an email to a user who complained, "Just avoid holding it in that way. You're holding it wrong." The internet generated a wave of mockery that lasted weeks. Consumer Reports, which had recommended every previous iPhone, publicly declined to recommend the iPhone 4. This was significant. Consumer Reports had enormous influence over mainstream buyers at the time. Not recommending a flagship iPhone was front-page news. Apple eventually held a press conference, offered free bumper cases to all iPhone 4 owners, and acknowledged the problem. Without fully admitting fault, the phone sold tens of millions of units anyway. Nobody stopped buying iPhones. Apple's most embarrassing public moment in 2012 involved a product they had spent years building to replace Google. Apple Maps. Apple removed Google Maps as the default iPhone navigation app in September 2012 and replaced it with their own. Apple Maps launched with wrong directions, missing streets, businesses in wrong locations, and satellite images so distorted that bridges appeared to be melting. In Australia, the app directed drivers to a remote location in a national park 43 miles from their destination. Police issued a public safety warning telling people not to use Apple Maps. 1 year later, in September 2013, the app directed multiple drivers in Fairbanks, Alaska, onto a taxiway at Fairbanks International Airport. 2 separate drivers ended up on the runway. The airport had to issue a notice to pilots warning them of vehicles on the airfield. Airport staff put up physical barriers to stop it happening again. Tim Cook released a public letter of apology in September 2012, telling iPhone users to use competitor apps while Apple fixed theirs. An Apple CEO publicly telling customers to use Google instead was genuinely unprecedented. Apple has been improving Maps for over a decade. It still has not fully caught Google. The next failure involved how people carry their phones. Bendgate. The iPhone 6 Plus launched in September 2014. Larger screen, thinner body, premium aluminum design. Within days, users started reporting that the phone was bending. Not from dropping it, not from sitting on it deliberately, from carrying it in their front jeans pocket while going about a normal day. The aluminum chassis around the volume buttons was the weak point. The phrase Bendgate became a global trending topic. Apple responded that only 9 customers had reported the problem. The internet responded with thousands of videos. Consumer testing confirmed the phone bent at significantly less force than competing devices. Apple revised the internal chassis design quietly in later production runs. The official response remained, "This is not a widespread issue." The official video evidence said otherwise. The next decision was framed as a statement of artistic bravery, removing the headphone jack. Apple removed the 3.5mm headphone jack from the iPhone 7 in September 2016. The company's vice president of marketing, Phil Schiller, described this decision as requiring courage. The reaction was immediate and global. Every other major phone manufacturer released marketing materials mocking Apple. Samsung ran a full-page ad campaign. Google ran one. LG ran one. The jokes about removing the jack were not subtle. Then, quietly, Samsung removed the headphone jack from the Galaxy S20 in 2020. Google removed it from the Pixel 2 in 2017. LG removed it from the LG G5 in 2016. Every company that mocked Apple removed their own jack within 3 years. The decision Apple was publicly ridiculed for became the industry standard. Whether that makes it courageous or predatory remains genuinely debatable. The next product failure lasted 4 years. The butterfly keyboard. In 2015, Apple redesigned the keyboard mechanism in its MacBook laptops. The goal was a thinner profile and more precise key travel. The mechanism they chose was called a butterfly switch. It was extraordinarily sensitive to contamination. A single grain of dust under a key could cause the key to stop working, double type, or not register at all. This was not a rare edge case. This was a consistent, widespread problem that affected enormous numbers of MacBook users. Apple introduced the butterfly keyboard across its entire laptop lineup, MacBook, MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, and kept it there from 2015 to 2019. They revised the mechanism 3 times during those 4 years, each time claiming the new version fixed the problem. None of the revisions fixed the problem. In 2019, Apple admitted there was an issue and offered a keyboard repair program. They settled a class action lawsuit for $50 million. The butterfly keyboard was finally replaced with a traditional scissor switch mechanism in 2020. Apple sold a keyboard they knew was defective for 5 years. The next failure was more deliberate, throttling old iPhones. In December 2017, a developer noticed that his iPhone 6s was performing significantly worse than expected. He ran benchmarks before and after replacing the battery. After the new battery, performance returned to normal. This was not coincidence. Apple confirmed what had been suspected. iOS updates had introduced software that intentionally reduced processor performance on iPhones with degraded batteries. The stated reason was to prevent unexpected shutdowns from aged batteries that could no longer deliver peak current. Apple had never disclosed this to users. Most users assumed their phone was slowing down because it was old and needed replacing. Many bought a new iPhone they did not need. Apple apologized, dropped the price of out-of-warranty battery replacements to $29 through 2018, and added a battery health indicator to iOS. They also paid a $500 million class action settlement in the United States. They paid a further $113 million settlement to 33 US states. Governments in France, Italy, South Korea, and elsewhere investigated. Apple denied any wrongdoing throughout. The next failure never launched at all. AirPower. In September 2017, Apple showed a product called AirPower, a wireless charging mat that could charge an iPhone, Apple Watch, and AirPods simultaneously, anywhere on the surface, without precise placement. You could just drop your devices anywhere on the mat and they would charge. It looked simple. It looked finished. It looked like it was weeks from shipping. Apple listed it on product packaging. Retailers were briefed. Tech journalists noted the date with excitement. 1 month passed. 6 months. A year. In March 2019, Apple quietly published a single paragraph stating that AirPower had been canceled. The reason given: it had not met Apple's high standards for hardware. No detail, no engineering explanation, no timeline for a replacement product. Just a single sentence of corporate language and silence. The problem, as later reported, was that the overlapping coils required to charge multiple devices anywhere on the mat generated heat that Apple could not manage safely or reliably in the thickness they wanted. The physics were harder than the marketing had implied. AirPower was canceled because Apple announced a product they had not yet proven could work. It remains the only time in recent Apple history that a staged, fully branded product packaging level announcement simply did not result in a product. The next failure was shaped like a piece of missing screen: the notch. The iPhone X launched in November 2017 with a screen that went nearly edge to edge. To accommodate the Face ID camera array and sensors, Apple cut a rectangular section out of the top of the display. This became known as the notch. Android manufacturers spent the following 2 years producing YouTube ads, billboard campaigns, and social media posts mocking the notch. The notch was ugly. It interrupted the screen. It was a compromise Apple had dressed up as a design feature. Then Android phones started adding notches. Samsung added a hole-punch camera. Huawei added a notch. OnePlus added a notch. Every phone on Earth now has some version of the front camera interrupting the display. Apple eventually replaced their notch with a dynamic island in 2022, a smaller pill shape that software uses creatively. The notch they were mocked for became the template for the entire industry. The next failure involved the price of wheels. Mac Pro wheels. Apple launched the Mac Pro in 2019 with a wheel upgrade option. 4 wheels that allowed the tower to roll across the floor. Price: $999 for the 4 wheels. Not the stand, not the monitor, not the computer, just the wheels. For context, the wheels had a single function: allow the computer to move. They came with no brakes. They could be locked in place only by manually tipping the computer, tightening a small mechanism, and setting it back down. Apple's most expensive product had wheels that cost more than most people's laptops and worked worse than any office chair. The reaction was immediate. $999 for wheels became a permanent reference point in any conversation about Apple's pricing strategy. It is difficult to overstate how much this single product damaged Apple's relationship with the people most likely to defend their pricing. The next failure involved trying to let people fix their own phones. The self-repair program. In April 2022, Apple launched its self-service repair program. The promise: customers could now repair their own iPhones using official Apple parts and tools. Journalists and right-to-repair advocates were cautiously optimistic. Then the kit arrived. To repair an iPhone battery, Apple sent 2 large industrial Pelican cases on wheels. Total weight, 79 pounds. The rental fee was $49 for 7 days. But when journalists calculated the total cost of a DIY screen repair, parts plus tool rental, it came out higher than simply going to Apple's own store. The program that was supposed to empower users to repair their own phones cost more than not repairing it yourself. Apple also required a $1,200 credit card hold for the tool rental. The instructions were 80 pages long. The intent was right. The execution was so complicated it functioned more as compliance theater than genuine support for the right to repair. The final failure is still ongoing: Apple Intelligence delays. At WWDC 2024, Apple announced Apple Intelligence, AI built directly into iOS, iPad OS, and Mac OS, writing tools across every app, notification summaries, a dramatically more capable Siri, image generation, priority inbox management. It was positioned as the most significant software announcement in years. It launched in October 2024 with iOS 18.1. Incomplete. The more significant features, including the improved Siri with personal context and deeper integration, were delayed to later updates. In many countries, Apple Intelligence was still unavailable months after launch. The EU had not approved it. China had not approved it. Features that had been central to the original announcement were described as coming soon for the better part of a year. Apple had announced AI that was not yet built. They had spent a decade positioning privacy as the reason they moved slower than Google and others on AI. When the AI arrived, it was late, incomplete, and geographically restricted. Whether it catches up remains an open question. Apple is worth $3 trillion. They make more revenue than most countries. They have built one of the most loyal customer bases in the history of commerce. And they have made some of the most avoidable, arrogant, and genuinely baffling mistakes of any technology company that has ever existed. The pattern never changes. Apple makes a decision. The world laughs. Apple doubles down. And somehow Apple comes out ahead. That is either genius or the most loyal customer base ever built. Probably both. Not everything Apple copied worked out either. Every iPhone feature Apple copied from Android. It is on screen right now.